Hey everyone, this is the second video on night shifts and how I survive as a critical care physician doing nights while traveling. This is night 2 of 4 for me, and last night I had mentioned that I wanted to make this a pretty big priority because a lot of us don't have any choices. We have to do what we have to do. We have to work nights. They're not optimal, and they provide some really big health disadvantages, but we have to work with what we have, so let's take a look at how we can make things optimal, improve our health, and prevent some weight gain and hopefully maybe some weight loss. So anyway, common sense disadvantage of night shifts. And by the way, this all comes from an article that I found last night that was published in the Journal of International Endocrinology. It is a 2015 article entitled Shift Work and Endocrine Disorders. So it was quite a find for me when I wanted to work on this. So anyway, the common sense disadvantage of nights. Number one, you're more likely to be sedentary. Studies have found that night shift workers are more likely to sit on the job than day shift workers. Number two, you're less likely to do organized activity simply because you're too tired to go run. You're too tired to go to a workout. So your activity is significantly less. Number three, your diet is suboptimal. That just makes sense. You're not eating at home with your family a lot. You may not be bringing leftovers. We lose all inhibition when we work nights, and things look good to us and make total sense to us at night that wouldn't during the day just because we're tired and our defenses are down. So when I go down to the doctor's lounge and there's an entire shelf of macadamia nut cookies, it's hard not to grab like 7 of them. And then lastly, sleep deprivation. Sleep deprivation is associated with an extra 350 to 400 calories additional per day of intake. That's a lot. So in addition to those common sense things, we also have physiologic things that happen when we do night shifts that we need to think about. And these really set you up at a disadvantage, and that's why I thought this was important, because there are things that we can do to try to combat this. If you're working the nights, you want to do everything that you can to maintain your health. So number one, the night shift messes with your hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. You don't need to really know what that is, except for the fact that it affects your hormones, affects your cortisol, which is your stress hormone. Night shifts in itself are stressful, thus you produce extra cortisol. In addition, our bodies normally produce cortisol at normal times throughout the day based on what is normal for a human to be awake versus asleep. That gets messed up. Second, the body is not equipped to be eating on such a strange circadian rhythm. It's not equipped to be eating at night. It's not natural for it. So therefore you have the cortisol that's going to be messed up, and you also have the insulin response that's not going to be quite as good as it's going to be during the daytime. So those are two big hormone responses that are completely out of whack when you work night shifts. And then the last thing I want to mention is that your insulin sensitivity goes down when you're doing the night shift. And that just means, during the day you have an insulin response to carbohydrates that you eat that should be an appropriate response. You eat so many carbohydrates, the body pumps out so much insulin to handle those carbohydrates. Said and done, all fine. At nighttime, that response is a little blunted. So you eat some carbohydrates, your pancreas shoots out some insulin, and the body doesn't respond quite as well. So to keep that blood sugar under control and at a normal level, your body has to give a lot more insulin than it normally does. And this leads to insulin resistance. So we're going to talk later about ways to increase your insulin sensitivity during the night shift. So one of the other things I want to touch on is the relationship between diabetes type 2 and shift workers. Shift and night workers are twice as likely to be diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. Not only that, they have a higher incidence of being uncontrolled in their blood glucoses than those who work the day shift. The risk of type 2 diabetes with night shift workers goes up after age 45, and it also increases when you work night shifts for a long time. So if you're only doing night shifts because, hey, it's Christmas season, I got to make some extra money, I'm going to do a few nights here and there, it really doesn't matter all that much. But if you're one of those lifers that does nights your whole career, it does increase your chance of type 2 diabetes. And lastly, I want to talk about metabolic syndrome. So people who do night shifts and are on shift work have according to the studies, 1.5 to 4 times higher risk for developing metabolic syndrome. If you want to know the criteria for metabolic syndrome, you can always Google that. But anyway, that's a significant increase in a cardiovascular metabolic risk factor that we really don't want. So from here on out, knowing all of these things that are associated with night shifts and shift work that can affect your health tremendously, we're going to talk about how to at least minimize some of those effects and try to do what we can, work with what we have, because we have to be here, right? We have to work nights. So let's try to optimize everything that we can to make this as positive on our health as we possibly can. Thanks.